Scientists in Newcastle, part of an elite of British researchers who've become world-renowned for their work into stem cells, cells which have the potential of developing into any part of the body. Researchers here and a group in London have applied for permission to fuse parts of animal and human cells in order to create stem cells. But it's proving controversial. The government wants it banned, and it's thought the regulator, the Human Fertilisation and Embryology Authority, will reject the application ahead of a ban.
If the government bans this, it shuts off a completely novel and highly important area of research that may lead to new cures and new therapies.
The scientists insist this kind of research is the best tool for advancing our understanding of complex diseases such as motor neuron, Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. They want to use animal eggs because of a shortage of human eggs, but they say any resulting embryo, called a hybrid, would be 99% human. But critics say they're repulsed by the idea and that there must be no approval of the creation of an animal-human hybrid. Sophie Hutchinson, BBC News.
How many eggs is it going to take for me or my colleagues in Newcastle who have a little bit of cloning experience? How many human eggs will it take for me to make a cloned human embryonic stem cell line? I roughly estimated, well, Wong had 2,200. I would need probably 10,000. So where do we get 10,000 eggs of high quality from young donors without the moral and ethical conundrum of getting these eggs from humans? Next slide, please. We do what Wong did. We bring on the cows. The argument goes something like this. If you take a cow egg and you remove the nucleus from the cow egg, there is no longer a cow there. What makes a cow and us human are the chromosomes in the nucleus. That confers species identity. If you remove a cow nucleus and the cow chromosomes, there is no longer a cow there. It is devoid of species. In the same way that if we remove the nucleus from a human egg, it's devoid of genetic identity, but it's also devoid of species identity as well. There are definitely cow mitochondria within the egg, and we can discuss that, but it is not a cow anymore. If we take a human cell, say from this chap, who you can tell is wildly enthusiastic about this technology and came out very much in support of this, and you transfer a human cell into this empty cowless egg, our argument went, confer human species identity into this. And the embryo which is derived from that has to be human. It can't be anything else. It's not half human, half cow. It's not a cow man or a cow girl. It's not a bunny man. This was a rabbit egg. It is a human embryo. And I would argue it's not even really a hybrid embryo. It is a human embryo with hybrid mitochondria. And the Select Committee report came out in August, and unanimously, which is rare of a Select Committee, unanimously they supported this research and said this research can be licensed like any other human embryo research. These are human embryos. It's the HFEA's responsibility to license this. And the HFEA agreed in September 2007 that interspecies nuclear transfer embryos were human embryos. They weren't half embryos or half cows or whatever. They were human embryos. They fell under the HFEA Act, and they then had 3 months to decide whether or not to grant us a license. So Lyle and I were granted our licenses in January 2008. And it was a huge victory for us, and for the scientific community, and for the patient charities that supported us. And if that was the end of the story, that would be kind of interesting. But what happened next was the HFEA, this bill that had been lingering around, Parliament and the government decided that they would pursue that they would update the HFEA Act. And the government proposed that hybrid embryos, which they had now allowed here, would be part of the new bill. What ultimately was put into the bill were all these new classifications of embryos. So this is the hybrid embryo that we wanted to make, which takes a non-human egg and puts human DNA into it. What the government ultimately decided was that, scientists aren't going to stop here. Somebody's going to come in and say, well, actually, I want to do a little bit more than that. I want to create a transgenic human embryo. That is, I want to put animal DNA into a human embryo. Or I might want to make a chimera, half human, half animal, using animal cells into a human embryo. Or somebody, God forbid, might actually want to create a true cowgirl, where you would use a human sperm, let's say, and a cow egg, and create something that really is half human, half cow. Now, this really surprised me. I thought, you know, why does the government want to include these things? And it turned out to be a very wise decision. Because if these are in the HFEA Act, they are then legislated. And you cannot create any of these without a license from the HFEA. Now, this latter one was really the tough one for a lot of people to swallow. Because, you know, this is really creating true hybrids. Now, the law was that you could create, potentially you could create this, but you could not grow this embryo beyond 14 days in culture. It would have to be destroyed after 14 days. And if you implanted this either into an animal or a human uterus, you would go to prison for 10 years. Okay? The alternative was to leave this out, and that it either was not in the Act, which meant you could do it without a license, so that's unacceptable, or you ban this completely. And as scientists, we'd fought very hard for research not to be banned, so this had to be in the Act. Now, a lot of conservatives felt the government was promoting the creation of these things, and actually they weren't. What they were doing was saying, if somebody is, you know, really kind of crazy enough to want to create this, they got to go to the regulator. They have to show why you can only do it in this way, and you can't do it with a cow-rabbit combination. It's got to be human-animal. It's got to meet one of those 8 research areas, and it has to be necessary or desirable. Is it desirable to create a cowgirl or a cowman? I mean, that's going to be very, very difficult to get through the HFEA, I would argue. So this is in the Act, and it is in principle permitted, but whether or not you would ever get a license to do this remains to be seen, and I've not heard anyone in the UK scientifically put forward a good idea for why we should do these, but nevertheless, it's there, it's within Parliament. So we have the new HFEA Act. It was signed, it passed, it was signed into law by the Queen in October, and it will come in force sometime next year. So this is actually what the whole thing was about. We just wanted to be able to clone cells from individuals who have these known genetic forms of neurological disorders and try to establish these disease in a dish models. And we now have the ability to do that. Both Lyle and I have been licensed to do this. This is now legal in the UK to create any of these types of embryos, and there's a third group now who's licensed to do this as well.